everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Magical Jill, and today we are going to be talking about how Fullmetal Alchemist went from a rich story with multiple adaptations and games to a dumping ground for mobile games. And my husband is extremely passionate about this subject. Fullmetal Alchemist and Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood are probably his most favorite animes of all time, so I had him do kind of the bulk of this video because he's so much more knowledgeable on it than I am. And I will be in some more videos in the future just because I am very excited to talk more about Fullmetal Alchemist, about Dragon Ball, about Sailor Moon. I have some other things I'm going to do coming up too, so I can't wait for you guys to see all my rest of my videos. But first, before we get into it, I did want to ask a question of the day. My question of the day today is, do you guys like when anime shows up in mobile games, especially for things like timed events? Because I personally think it's kind of annoying that, you know, they show up for a little while and then it just goes away and you can't really get it again. And, you know, I like some mobile games, but honestly, I feel like I have a lot more fun with full-blown video games that actually stick around.
Fullmetal Alchemist, both the 2003 and the 2009-ish Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood versions, I would say both of these anime are some of my favorite pieces of media ever created. I also do love the manga, obviously. I mean, the manga is very, very similar to Brotherhood. When it comes down to it, the characters of Ed and Al, their story, their world, Roy Mustang, the Amestrian military, whether it is the 2003 version where it's a little more focused on the human side of things and how humans have corruptibly caused their own problems, or it's focused a little bit more on the homunculus side of things, how they've influenced humans in Brotherhood, I think either way, I love this universe. I guess I should say both or all three versions of this universe. When it comes to gaming, we've made a couple videos about this in the past. We've talked a little bit about the Broken Angel. We've talked a little bit about how Fullmetal Alchemist as just a universe deserves more video games. And, you know, I want to be clear, we don't want this series milked. Like, when we talk about video games and stuff like that, we're not saying, hey, you know, go force Arakawa to go back to the drawing board and do more of the story or anything like that. For me, I just think that Fullmetal Alchemist is a missed opportunity when it comes to certain mediums, and video games are especially one of them. I think when it comes to video games, Square Enix, who really does hold a lot of the cards and a lot of the rights to these characters, has been very lazy with them. Square Enix in general, you know, along with Arakawa, was responsible for Fullmetal Alchemist just existing. Like footing the bill, spending money, stuff like that, having the anime made, and everything. But when it comes down to it, a lot of the video games never left Japan, and even then, they just kind of died after about 2009-ish, and Fullmetal just essentially became a mobile game brand, which I think is a shame. And even if you were okay with that, the fact that all of these games have essentially died over time, or at least a lot of them have, leads to zero game preservation for these characters, for these actual, you know, universes that matter to people. When you tease a collaboration, so for example, something like Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, and you're like, hey, we're putting Ed and Al in here, or Roy Mustang, or whoever, and you just know that eventually it will shut down, and by the way, did shut down, that's even more of a slap in the face when you already don't make anything anymore for that universe. Now, again, I don't want to say that like that's Arakawa's fault. That's not my point, because she told this beautiful story. She told this very beautiful story in the manga, which was then adapted obviously into Brotherhood later on with some changes here and there. And of course, as well, she was extremely gracious about a lot of things. Like if you read her interviews about the video games, she was excited that it got turned into a video game. When you read her interviews and statements about things like the anime and even Conqueror of Shambhala, which is entirely different than her version of the story, she's extremely gracious and honestly just seemed very happy and excited for stuff to be made outside of her. Like she was never a super controlling person who was like, hey, no, you anime people, don't change that. She was totally fine with what they did. And I find that fascinating as a creator to see someone that was so open to and willing to see their characters flourish in other mediums and also under other writers, which I thought was actually really cool. Like she enjoyed these things, video games, things like that, as a bystander who had originally created Ed, Al, and the entire Fullmetal Alchemist universe. But unfortunately, when it comes to Square Enix, and this is something I've even talked about a little bit on one of my other channels, JRPG, where we take a look at RPG games, which is something Square Enix is very known for. Well, when it comes to them, they have a very bad history when it comes to game preservation, game translation, and of course as well, mobile gaming. Sadly, when it comes to Fullmetal Alchemist, there are so many things that could have been done. Like, for example, they did not have enough money to make the entirety of the 2003 anime. If you actually look into it a little more, and I can provide some sources in the description, there are a lot of statements about cut ideas, cut content. Originally, it was like 12-ish episodes, I believe, of ideas. Then it got cut down to one movie, and then one movie that was shorter, to my understanding. And then you got Conqueror of Shambhala to kind of end the 2003 anime. So that right there is something that if you wanted to, as Square Enix, or you wanted to say, hey, Arakawa, how about we expand this idea and we actually flesh out that ending a little more because we didn't have money at the time, you certainly could, right? But instead of doing that, and instead of actually wanting to translate the Fullmetal Alchemist games that exist that haven't been, like Stray Rondo, or Fullmetal Alchemist 3, or even games like Prince of the Dawn, instead of wanting to translate these games, Square Enix gave up at a certain point. What they said was, well, you know what? These didn't sell quite well enough in America and in Europe and the Western cultures, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna stop. Yes, we released Fullmetal Alchemist 1 and 2, but now what we're gonna do is we're just going to ignore at least 6 video games, never give them an official translation at all, and sorry if you cared about them, we don't care that you did. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna just start dumping Ed and Al into mobile gaming. We're gonna just start dropping them into games like Monster Strike, or Unison League, or Crash Fever, or Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. The amount of crossover events there have been since 2009 with Full Metal is actually kind of crazy. Like they really have put them in a lot of different things. You know, a lot of times it's something that Square Enix already owns or has a stake in, but also they kind of feel okay pimping out those characters to whatever, as long as they have something to gain, even though the games that they are putting the characters in don't last. The games that they are dropping these characters in usually shut down. Brave Exvius being one of them, honestly, and War of the Visions, a sort of sequel to Brave Exvius, probably going to be another one at some point here at the very least. And it's really unfortunate because when I look at the world of Fullmetal Alchemist, it is so ripe for the ideas of a video game. This is actually how I felt for a very long time about something like even Harry Potter. You know, whether you're a big Harry Potter fan or not, you look at that world, it is actually kind of shocking that something like Hogwarts Legacy wasn't made years earlier. You kind of look at that and you're like, this is a goldmine of a universe. How did you sit on that for so long and not really do anything compelling with it? Like why is it that all of your games are like okay at best? You know, very few of them were good. What happened here? And what sucks is when you look at Fullmetal Alchemist, I actually think that their games got better over time. Some of them were very good, I think, personally. Some of them were okay, but they had been getting better and better progressively for quite a while until they just kind of gave up. And I think what's really sad is when you look at where they gave up, I believe it was around the Fullmetal Alchemist trading card game, which for some reason got a release in the West. And to me, it's like, why did we get that, but we didn't get something like Prince of the Dawn on the Wii? You know, there were entire animated cutscenes made for these games that just never materialized in the West because Square Enix didn't feel like it. But you know what Square Enix does feel like? Dropping Ed and Al into Crash Fever, or dropping Ed and Al into, I don't even know how to say this, Sino Alice. If you're a big mobile gamer, that's totally fine. I don't care. I actually think some of these crossovers are kind of fun. Like Brave Exvius was cool. I mean, some of these, if they weren't just limited time, I would have loved to have downloaded the game for free, found a way to unlock Ed or Al, played around with them for a bit and shut it off. But unfortunately, what this has become is sort of a brand that, I mean, it reminds me a little bit of what we talked about with Sailor Moon, actually, where it was like with Sailor Moon, Naoko and the rights holders around that seem totally fine with bringing Sailor Moon back whenever they want to sell a handbag, or whenever they want to sell some underwear, or whenever they want to sell some toy. But they're not okay with bringing it back to tell a story. And for me, that's kind of where it's frustrating. Like, I want to be clear, unless Arakawa herself ever wanted to come back to the manga itself and tell another story like X amount of years later, or tell some kind of story in another country or following other characters, I don't think I'd want that, because she was an expert craftsman in storytelling. She did such an amazing job. So when it does come down to it, I do want to be clear that for me personally, when it comes to the manga, I think it's a perfect story with a bow wrapped on top that I wouldn't touch unless the original author herself had more to say. Or, you know, for some reason she picked some successor that she thought could tell a really good story. But when it comes to things like the 2003 anime, even things like Brotherhood, you know, where they did the Sacred Star of Milos movie, and then they just kind of left it there. You know, they like did this spin-off story and then ran away after that. Or even when it comes to the 2003 video game timelines, or timeline, depending on how you want to see it. The fact that there's about 4 or 5 of those games, and at least one for Brotherhood that was never translated anywhere other than Japan, to me it's mind-boggling. So you not only have a company that just quit and gave up before they could release their games worldwide of these beloved characters, but you also have a company that's still willing to pimp the characters out to pretty much any mobile game that comes a-callin'. And I find this to be a sad fate for such beloved characters. I find it to be a sad fate for a world where anything is possible. You know, where alchemy can't solve any problem, but it's so creative. It can create almost anything. Almost, obviously, when it gets down to it. That's one of the themes of the show. It's a world that is only limited by the imagination of a writer. And yet, instead of getting, you know, more content for that original anime version where you could actually fill in some of the gaps that were lacking, whether it be from not translating or whether it be from budgetary reasons like cutting the film short for Conqueror of Shambhala, instead of doing anything like that, Square Enix just says, nah, what's the newest mobile game? All right, well, let's just drop them in there and see if we can make a few bucks. And to me, it's a very, very sad situation to see when beloved literary characters, no matter who they are, just become something that a company drops into something else to make a few extra bucks. But it's something I'm more and more used to seeing. Even Fullmetal Alchemist Mobile itself, by the way, their own game that I'm sure we showed some of at least in this video, is no longer alive. It got shut down. And it was something that was supposed to go global at one point. It was supposed to get a global release. It never got it, never got it, never got it, and then eventually it shut down in Japan. Again, another case of missed opportunities, lack of game preservation. There's no way to play this, by the way. It was online only, which of course it was. And so for what? Almost, I would say 16 years now, pretty much every video game that Ed and Al have appeared in, they are either no longer accessible in because it shut down, no longer accessible in because it was just a mobile game that ended up being a timed event, or are no longer accessible because it was a mobile game like FMA Mobile itself that shut down, and that was their own game. I don't know. It really bums me out to see these characters reduced to just a drop in the bucket for a collaboration that they need. I wish that they would do more with these characters. It makes me sad to look at other anime, other manga, other characters that still have stories to tell, and to look at Fullmetal Alchemist and see that it's just become this.
Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I feel like my husband always has such an eloquent way of saying things that sometimes I feel like I can't explain as well as I'd like to. So I'm really glad that he kind of talked about this whole subject, because he's very, very passionate about it. He loves Fullmetal Alchemist, and it's just so sad that, you know, all these mobile games just always either shut down or they have limited time events that go away, and it's just so annoying. And I really wish that there was more video games for Fullmetal Alchemist that were in America that would stick around, you know, and be there forever. You know, things like the Fullmetal Alchemist and the Broken Angel game, that one, you know, it stuck around, it's translated well, and you can still play it to this day, which is really fun. And I just wish, you know, that they would be able to do that with some of the other games that never got to come to America. So if you enjoyed this video, I hope you leave a like and subscribe. I also have an awesome shop that you guys should go check out because I make a lot of one-of-a-kind pieces out of resin using recycled comic books and recycled manga pages from books that can't be sold in stores due to things like water damage or rips or whatever. So I take the good things from them and I use them in a transformative recycled art type of way to make resin coasters and keychains and other stuff like that. And you can use code SAILOR in all caps for 10% off of your order if you'd like. And my husband also has a Fortnite code, which is in all caps DJAY123. So if you like buying things on Fortnite at all, definitely put in our code beforehand because it helps support our channels a lot and helps keep us being able to do things around here, which makes me very happy. So I hope to see you all in the next video, and definitely go check out cosmobunny.shop, and I'll see you. Bye!